All right, to a league where scoring over 100 points happens every single night. The hottest team in the league this month, the Memphis Grizzlies, looking for their sixth straight dub. Ja Morant back in the starting five after missing Friday's games against the Pelicans with an illness. Of course, he had to return in style, rocking the Ja 2 special editions Ja Rafts, and he started the game in style as well. Morant finds big man Zach Edey in the air, and the center throws it down for the first bucket of the game. Later in the first half, it's Ja again, but this time he gets into a little scuffle with Keontae George, and both he and George were teed up, but Ja doesn't care about a tech. On the next play, throws it down, but then heated moments later in the quarter. We weren't done. This time it's Drew Eubanks and Edey. Eubanks gets tagged with a flagrant two, and gets the boot. The ejection marked the beginning of the end for the Jazz, and Jaren Jackson put up 20 of his 28 points in the first half. 6 total Grizzlies posting double digits, including Gigi Jackson with 15, his highest total since returning from injury. Memphis would go on to win 125-103, racking up their 6th straight win.
After the it was a screen, and bro kind of like mugged me, and then Zach came over like, he bothering you, and I'm like, nah, bro. And then the first technical happened, so then I guess Zach thought I was lying, and then he became the enforcer that he is for this team. So shout out my big fella.
Yeah, so shout out to Zach Edey there. Ja Morant talking about the kind of the scuffle there between Zach Edey and Drew Eubanks. I thought this game was really fun to watch, but I think once those scuffles happen, they call this NBA rivalry week, which I don't recall the Jazz and the Grizzlies
to get in on it,
being a rivalry, but I think they made it a rivalry, at least for the night. Once Drew Eubanks came in there and kind of did a little pushing and shoving, I just thought it was hilarious, because after that, it's like the Grizzlies just took off. It's like, get out of the way at that point, because now y'all are on our home floor trying to embarrass us, and we're not going to see ourselves get punked, especially in Memphis.
I love that it doesn't take much to make Ja go and dunk. He's like, I'm not dunking. I'm done dunking. I'm not going to do it. He's like, oh, you're going to get into a scuffle with me? Oh, I'm going to go dunk on you. I'm going to prove you a point that you should have never gone there. I also just laugh at him calling Zach an enforcer. I'm not saying he's not an enforcer, but I think Ja's the last person that needs someone protecting him at all.
Yeah.
Like, I think Ja can very much hold his own in that situation, but it was kind of cool to see them kind of have that little brother, big brother bond and be together in that.
You think Ja can square up?
I'm sure he
needs
could.
to?
I'm sure he could. I have no doubts on that.
Yeah, it was good to see them building that team chemistry. The whole team loves Zach Edey. Nothing really happened in this game except for this. And so I'm the one shooting this game. Obviously Jaren goes off. That was great.
Right, yeah.
But everything happened in the first half pretty much. But everything happened really in 2 minutes because of all of the stuff going on. And so I'm shooting this game, and so I'm trying to get everything going on. And then as that is happening, I'm trying to clip a shot, basically showing my hand in front of the camera, right, so I can go back and look at it later. And then the whistle blows, and Ja goes right down the lane and dunks it. And so I hit record right at the last second and got the end there, and that's why it looks so choppy. But for the rest of the game, I could just chill. But I was so distracted by everything going on, and Drew Eubanks getting kicked out of the game. Avery, you and I were talking about it beforehand. Flagrant 2, maybe a little bit harsh for that. I don't know.
I understood the referee's explanation of what happened, and he's saying that on coming back down the floor, Drew Eubanks basically hits the accelerator and like speeds up to ram into Zach Edey. I don't know that I thought it should have been a flagrant 2. Flagrant 1, I was cool with, but it was like flagrant 2, he gets ejected. I was like, okay, but I was like, to me, he was a part of the. He helped escalate the first scuffle, right?
Oh, yeah,
so
he was tough.
That was Keontae George and Ja Morant. Taylor Jenkins gets really heated about it, but Taylor Jenkins gets so heated because Drew Eubanks comes in there on his, on just coming in there to stir it up more than it already was. And I think when he became part of the second scuffle, we're like, all right, now we got to get this guy out of here, right? So that's kind of where I came at it from. I think if that was an isolated thing, I don't know that they would have tossed him for that. But, when you got a Drew Eubanks running up against a 7'4", 300-pound man, like I don't think they want a mad Zach Edey running around. But you think the refs are protecting the potential Rookie of the Year here?
Well, it just seemed like if it was someone else, if he ran up to John Conchart like that, I don't know if he's getting kicked out of the game. You know what I mean? And those are two very different players, very different dynamics there. But it just, when it happened, I texted you, Rachel, before the call came out. And I said, he should not get kicked out for this. And I mean, I don't think that it really mattered. The Grizzlies were always going to win this game. They were already up by 10 at that point. But it's not like what you really see in the NBA. It is very common for someone to shoulder barge another player. A lot of times you get him on a flagrant 1 or a flagrant 2 because it's in the chest. If it's shoulder to shoulder, I just don't feel like it's that big of a deal. And Edey took it with grace. I will say that. I mean, a lot of players.
I don't know if I would call it grace, but
a lot of players would immediately. You do that to Rudy Gobert. You do that to Karl Anthony Towns. They're immediately going to come back at you, and there might be a face shove in there. You know, the famous, because no one throws a punch in the NBA.
Right,
it's always just face shoves. Yeah. But Edey's smart because his entire career, players were trying to do that. His college career, players were trying to get in his head by trying to out-physical him, stepping on his feet a lot. You know, so he knows how to compose himself. He's a really smart player. And so, yeah, I don't know if I fully will die on the hill that the NBA is trying to protect him, but it's in the NBA's best interest to make sure that Zach Edey looks good, right?
It's Drew Eubanks. He rams into him, and then Zach barely moves. I don't know if he moved at all, but Zach braces for impact, right? Barely moves, and then he starts like stomping up towards Eubanks. Eubanks just backing up. He's like,
Eubanks didn't
He's
want
like, I
any
messed
of that.
up, man. I'm over here about to mess up the set. He's like, I messed up. And I just thought it was so funny because at that point, it was clear all the momentum, I think, all the energy, whatever was needed for the Grizzlies was on the Grizzlies side of that.
Yeah, I don't know what was going through Eubanks' mind in that moment to be like, this is a good guy for me to go and shoulder charge right here. Like, no, he's so tall. I know Eubanks is also very tall, but that is not the guy I'm picking on that court to go and try and ram into at all in that situation. Especially not me. I would be on the floor in an instant if I tried to do that. I mean, look, it was a fun part to the game, which was otherwise kind of boring, let's be real.
Well, they blew him out in the third quarter.
Which is just like, I mean, if you're a Grizzlies fan, it's great to watch. You're like, sweet, my team's doing amazing right now. But outside of that, you're like, yeah, okay, like, cool, another win. I think it's been a great run for the Grizzlies, right? 6 straight wins for them. Impressive. But when you look at the teams that they've beaten on those 6 games, only one team over 500. Every other team under 500. So they've done what they should have done over these past 6 games. Yes, it's good, and yes, you should be thinking, if you're a Grizzlies fan, great, my team's doing what they should be doing, what we're asking of them to be doing. But it's not like, oh my God, this team is amazing. They just won 6 in a row. They won 6 games against pretty easy opponents. The only tough opponent in there was the Bucks that they beat by 2 in the dying seconds. So every other team is kind of a should have won, did win. Okay, now the real test is this week. You've got going to the Knicks, it's going to be the East 3 seed versus the West 3 seed. And then back home on Thursday against the Rockets, who have got the best of the Grizzlies so far this year. Number 2 seed in the West. Like we said, have got the best of them. They've beaten 3 times this season. Grizzlies looking for that get back this week. But these 2 games, I think, can really set the Grizzlies apart this year. They're obviously playing really good basketball. We think they're going to make a deep playoff run into everything they're doing and if everyone stays healthy. But now it's just kind of continuously proving that and cleaning up some things and making sure they're getting back on track and lacking things. I think the interesting thing for me over this past stretch is we talked so much about Santi Aldama and how much they missed him when he was out injured. He obviously had a couple really rough games, especially against the Bucks, and then another rough game, and then he ended up being sick. So potentially, like looking back at hindsight, he was probably sick playing those first 2 games, and that's why he was a bit off. But to see him not be in the starting lineup, not be in the team at all these last couple games, and the Grizzlies just still doing so well without him. You saw Ja miss a couple of those games as well.
Luke Kennard's been huge. He's really filled that.
Luke's been massive.
Luke Kennard's been huge, but you also get Gigi Jackson back. So it's like you fill his rotation spot pretty easily. I'm not saying that Gigi's just been playing sensational since he's been back. He did play really well against the Utah Jazz. I think you mentioned 15 points, his best outing since he's been back. But that is what we've been talking about, where the Grizzlies' depth comes into play. Is like, okay, you're probably your best guy off the bench, at least this year. is gone for the last couple of games, and you just slot him in with a 6'9" freak of nature athlete in G.G. Jackson, who's just been licking his chops trying to get back into the scoring fold. So I think it's been really cool. To your point, Luke Kennard's been amazing in the month of January. I mean, I think you heard all that chirping about the
Potential
trade deadline
yeah.
talks and people trying to ship his salary away. He's like, hold on, I'm the literal second best shooter career percentage-wise in the entirety of the NBA. So I think, to your point, I think that depth is playing into a part. It'll be interesting to see how Taylor Jenkins starts to trim up his rotation, because you can't go into the playoffs with 10, 11 guys in the rotation. We're thinking Vince Williams Jr. is going to be back here pretty soon. But that's a tomorrow problem right now, right?
And
we still haven't even hit the All-Star break, and I think Taylor Jenkins is pressing all the right buttons up until this point.
And realistically, that's a pretty good problem to have. Like, oh man, I've got so many good players. Which ones am I going to put in my rotation?
Tonight? Oh man,
damn. That's exactly the position the Grizzlies want to be in, especially after last year.
Well, I'm excited tonight. You talked about how big of a game the Knicks and obviously the Rockets on Thursday is going to be. Edey going up against Karl Anthony Towns. Jaren Jackson versus Big Cat has always been fun, and you know that they'll get matched up on and off. Josh Hart, another big player that could be a factor, is a game-time decision tonight for the Knicks. That guy could be an absolute X factor for them. I would love to see how Jenkins and his staff game plan for Josh Hart's offensive and defensive rebounding ability overall. But I think that this game is a really big game for someone like Jalen Wells and Zach Edey. You're going into the Garden on a Monday night. You're on a 6-game win streak. How do you handle yourself? That's going to be a big one. You don't want to miss it tonight.
Very, very good point. All right, we'll move on. Before we move on, I want to say, great week for FedEx Forum.
Oh, yeah.
5-0 this week.
6-0.
6-0 between the Tigers and the Grizzlies. Pretty cool.